Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 8th, 2025 legislative session of the Town of Ossining. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Councilmember Meyer,
Present.
Councilmember Philatawil,
Here.
Councilmember Manicchio,
Here.
Councilmember Weinst,
Present.
Supervisor Feldman.
Present.
Public hearing, approval of cable television franchise renewal agreement between the Town of Austin and Cablevision of Austining LP. To have a motion to adjourn to August 12th, 2025.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Supervisor and Town Board announcements.
It is Friday, July 11th, continuing the River Jam. This week's performing group is the 3Bs, playing a mix of original, classic, and contemporary blues covers. The Lewis Ingalls Spray Park continues to be open 7 days a week from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. up until Labor Day. During heat waves, we often open it from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Please watch the town webpage for that information. Starting July 2nd, on Wednesdays, summer camp will be using Spray Park until 3. Then it will open for the rest of the day to the public. Tonight's Taylor Swift tribute band performance has been moved into the community center due to the inclement weather. Tomorrow, Wednesday, July 9th, there'll be a public forum regarding the proposed changes to the electric and gas delivery rates and practices of Con Ed. Anyone wishing to comment on any aspect of these proceedings or these rate changes has the opportunity to make a statement at the in-person hearings at Westchester County Center tomorrow in White Plains, 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. There will be a blood drive at OVAC, Ossining Volunteer Ambulance Corps, tomorrow, July 9th from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Thursday, July 10th, will be the artist reception for Dance the Shore, abstract photo art exhibit. While the reception will be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., the exhibit will be up in the library until July 30th. Friday, July 11th, Westchester Collaborative Theater will be presenting Verses and Vignettes, spoken word and improv performance event. For more information, please visit wctheater.org. UMAC Briarcliff is hosting a fundraiser car wash for the sparring team this Saturday, July 12th, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. UMAC Briarcliff parking lot on North State Road. Monday, July 14th, Senator Pete Harcum will be sitting down at the Ossining Public Library for a discussion on the New York State legislative session, issues affecting our district. Starting at 6 p.m., participants are encouraged to bring questions and ideas and concerns. Grand opening of Ritual Yoga is scheduled for Saturday, July 19th, starting with a free yoga class at 3 p.m., followed by a ribbon cutting and reception at 4:30 p.m. There are planned refreshments, giveaways, and raffles. Please support this new local business at 195 Main Street, Unit C, kind of in the back. St. Augustine's Church Festival, running from July 23rd to July 26th, 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Ossining Union Free School District Summer Food Program is starting up soon. It has already started, please excuse me. Free breakfast and lunch for anyone under 18 years old, July 1st through August 15th. Please visit the Ossining Union Free School District website for more information. Remember, Neighbors Link is a great source of information and resources for our immigrant population. Please visit their website, www.neighborslink.org. For more information, click resources, register to attend informational webinars. State New York Attorney General has released a list of resources with goals of protecting the rights of New Yorkers regardless of immigration status. For more information, please visit ag.gov/resources/individuals/immigrants' rights. As always, our Ossining Public Library will be hosting many events, including movies, crafts, meditation, tutoring, yoga, book clubs, and more. See their website, ossininglibrary.org, for more information. The Loft LGBTQ+ Community Center has events and programs, resources, and presentations, all dedicated to providing support to everyone who is a part of the LGBT+ community, including many different virtual and in-person support groups, clubs for a multitude of different topics. Check out their website at loftgaycenter.org for more information. And there are many more fun and interesting events being held locally. You can look them up weekly on the supervisor's update on the supervisor's webpage. Do any of my colleagues have any? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any liaison reports? Public comment on agenda items. Visitors shall be accorded 1 4-minute opportunity to address the board on any of the resolutions on the agenda. If anybody would like to speak on any of the resolutions that we have on the agenda tonight. Anybody online? Board resolutions, approval of minutes, June 24, 2025. Resolved that the town board of Town of Ossining hereby approves the June 24, 2025 minutes of the regular meeting as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of voucher detail report. Resolved that the town board of Town of Ossining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated July 8, 2025 in the amount of $745,948.57. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Finance audit, Town of Ossining, 2024. Resolved that the town board of the Town of Ossining hereby acknowledge that in accordance with Section 35 of the General Municipal Law, the 2024 audits of the Town of Ossining financial statements and supplementary information and 2024 statement of cash received, cash disbursements, and cash balance for the town justice court has been distributed to and reviewed by the town board, and said report shall be on file with the Ossining of the town clerk, or the office of the town clerk. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and we will be having a public presentation of the audit coming soon. But all in favor?
Aye.
Monthly reports. Resolved that the town board of Town of Ossining hereby accepts the following monthly reports for the month of May 2025. Supervisor's office, tax receiver, town clerk, and Dale Cemetery. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Visitor recognition. Visitors shall be accorded 1 4-minute opportunity to address the board on issues not related to the agenda, but relevance to common good of the town. If anybody wish to speak on this topic, please come up.
Albrecht, my wife and I are here. We live at 4552 North State, and we're looking for some answers to something that has arisen in the neighborhood. We live behind Terra Rustica, and the property that is to our south, which is the Cellini property, has been sold. And we were in the occasion of being in the yard one night, and there was a guy with a bunch of guys in there cutting trees down. And I walked over and I asked him, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm your new neighbor. My name is Caesar, and I'm moving in. I bought the house and I bought the property right next door to us." We have asked a bunch of times to Gloria Freed at the town about purchasing the property, and it was never brought up again. Now this man owns it. Which brings us to my question now. He's telling us that he's going to buy the paper road that goes from his property all the way out to North State Road. I didn't know that we could buy a paper road. So Mr. Turnquist has come to our house and he was looking over the area, and he did say to my wife that, "Yeah, I think you can buy paper road." So we're wondering whether or not we can buy the paper road that's directly in front of our house. That's the only means of ingress and egress that we have. And if he has this through and I'm going to mention, this is rumor, he wants to bring his business to there. He wants to park his trucks because he owns a construction business, and he wants to enter on North State Road, come through so he doesn't have to turn around. I don't know if he has the availability of doing so, but he wants to park his construction business there in that property right next to us where Cellini's was. I don't know if that's going to be a problem. And I want to know if there's validity to what he says. Can he buy that paper road, which is our driveway, or which for all intents and purposes has been our driveway for the last 40 years? What do I do? What, can you give me any information? Can we buy the paper road?
All right, this has not come before the board.
Excuse me?
This has not come before the board, so
Oh,
I'm sure
okay.
it's not a done deal. Because we would have to approve it. And we can look into what conversations, I don't know who he's been having conversations with. I do know that they were doing some tree removal and the building inspector had a conversation with them about that.
And Pete Connolly said that he can't, but you know, the tree's down right there or whatever, or he didn't ask for it. Because I did reach out to Pete. And then we're getting older and we want to leave this piece of land to our kids. And one of them works for your town. His name is Marco Pisco Piello. They have a little baby. They want to raise a family. We have driveway with construction driveway, commercial driveway there. It's really right up on the line of my yard. So I don't know if that's any consideration that be taken into it, or whether or not he can buy it and make it a construction yard. Because he does rent the property across the street from where he lives on Ryder, and he wants to bring that whole operation over to where we are. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. We have no answers. I don't know where to go. I did speak to an attorney and he says, you got to go to the whole town and talk to them and see what's in place or what can be voted on or done with that property.
Okay, well, this is the first this board's hearing about it.
Okay.
And we will explore it and thank you for bringing it to our attention, especially his intentions. And we'll look into it.
Okay, and do we reach out to you or, and is it a done deal that he bought this piece of property? Do you know? I
It
mean,
couldn't be, we have not voted on it.
Not the paper street. What are you?
no, his
referring
property
to
that
when
was
you
right next
say-
door, where we were trying to buy for many years, never heard anything. Next thing we know, he tells me, I own this and I'm going to buy the paper road. Apparently, he says his attorney tells him he can. And Mr. Turnquist said to my wife that I think they can. Being that it's our only way of in and out, that kind of leaves us high and dry.
Whether it's legally permissible and whether the town board would entertain it are two very different things. And like the supervisor's been saying, this is the first time I think anyone in this room is hearing about this.
Okay. Thank you for your time. We're a little worried now, you know, because we are concerned. That's, I don't know what else to say.
Well, thank you for bringing your concerns to us and we will learn more as,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. And you can feel free to email us.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak under visitor recognition?
Rob, did you want to speak? I don't know if you just came to be here or if you wanted to.
Any questions about River Jam? So Rob Lowenthal, I'm the chairperson on the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Essex Chamber of Commerce, River Jam Committee, and we've already had one really good night, July 3rd. I don't know how many folks had been there, but it turned out all right. The weather gods sort of cooperated after a bit, and we had a good night, but I just wanted to know if there were any questions that I can answer from the town board or any concerns or feedback that we can, you know, either improve or something that wasn't addressed. So everybody pretty much had a great time and we'll see you again on the 11th, this Friday.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's all I need to know.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Rob. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak?
Online.
No. Do I have a motion to adjourn to work session? I have to read the whole thing? No. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn to work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Thank you. So for our work session, we're going to have a presentation by Valerie Manastra, the town planner, to discuss the town of Austening's open space plan.
Good evening.
So,
I think Martha's going to pull up. You have the
Bye-bye.
PowerPoint, right? Okay.
Night, Jen.
Right. All right. So we provided this board as well as the Environmental Advisory Council a draft of the open space plan. If you recall, the town board authorized moving forward with this particular plan. It is actually a Greenway grant funded project. This project is one of the implementation measures in your comprehensive plan, which specifically looked at, wanting to focus on some of your large open properties and open space and kind of create like an open space plan. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the overall concept of what an open space plan is, what we did, and kind of the conclusions, and then I'll talk about next steps. Martha? Okay. So basically an open space plan, first of all, it really focuses on identifying natural resources. It focuses on preserving existing preservation lands. It also focuses on recreational resources within a community. And from there, you prioritize specific areas for preservation, additional conservation based upon your analysis that you've done on some of the existing natural resources, preservation of lands, and recreational resources. It also outlines strategies for conservation as well as stewardship of priority lands that are specifically identified through the planning process. Part of this is also helpful in terms of with the conservation, your environmental advisory councils, because as they review projects that come before them, they're able to refer back to the open space plan to also look at the natural resources and some of the items that are areas of prioritization. Next slide. So the open space plan for the town of Austining specifically focused on identifying relationships between a number of your larger vacant or unbuilt or underutilized properties, your environmental resources, as well as your recreation amenities and your recreation like future plans. It also focuses on priority parcels for conservation with specifically when we're calling a planning rationale, which is really focused on identifying what things we can do in terms of land use tools and legal mechanisms in order to be able to preserve certain priority areas. And it also identifies tools for conservation, which would include acquisition or donation of land, voluntary conservation easements, conservation or cluster subdivisions, natural resources zoning, and also focus on natural resource protection, and then zoning overlays. And then, of course, the adoption of any of these types of zoning mechanisms can either be done with the open space plan process or right after the open space plan process. Next page. Next slide. So basically, an open space plan, a lot of times once communities will adopt the open space plan by 3 different types of mechanisms. First is either a resolution in which it basically you're adopting it by resolution outlining how this open space plan should be utilized. The second is a comprehensive plan. So you can either have it as an amendment to the comprehensive plan or appendix to the comprehensive plan. And then the third is a local law, which can be adopted. And then it specifically, again, identifies which land use board or what the mechanisms would be for the adoption and then also the implementation of the open space plan. Next. So, and the plan that you have, we developed 5 different sets of maps. This really deals with water resources, terrestrial resources, parks and protected lands, underdeveloped lands, as well as strategic parcels. So I'm going to go into a little bit of details for all the different maps and what kind of data we looked at. So first of all, water resources. We looked at wetlands, both the federally regulated wetlands, state regulated wetlands, and then hydric soils. This does not necessarily include like very, very local wetlands that we don't have any more information on besides like individual little site plans and stuff like that. But this is, but we collectively identified all the, pulled together all the identified wetlands that we have. Also stream quality, and stream quality runs from somewhere like class A, which is like your water supply, drinking water supply lands, all the way down to class D or SB, which is basically for fishing only or fish propagation. Next slide. We also looked at important habitats, including migratory fish areas, aquatic wildlife areas, and then also floodplains, both 100-year flood and also the 500-year floodplain. So in this particular map, and it's also, all the maps are provided to you as part of your draft. Basically, what I just want to highlight is that the key findings for the water resources really focused on, and this is probably this is no surprise to the town board, your Indian Brook Reservoir, your Croton and Hudson Rivers, Rock Hill Pond, and Sing Sing Hill. Also, the wetland areas primarily are found within the town of Ossining around your streams and your waterways. There's not a tremendous amount of pockets or larger wetlands without those kind of complexes associated with the streams and waterways. So we also looked at terrestrial resources, and this specifically focused on important habitats, and most around the town of Ossining really focuses on habitats for like fish traveling, as well as freshwater habitats. We also looked at core forests, and core forests are really areas of forest areas that are surrounded by, and this is as per definition, 100 meters of edge forest. So basically you have an area of forests that are for 100 meters outward from that core forest. You basically have either edge forest or other forest areas. So this is like, so it can sometimes be like old growth forests or ones that have not been touched for many years. Also, steep slopes is another item we looked at, and this, as you know, anything over 15 to 25% is moderately steep slope, and anything above 25% is very steep slopes. So in that particular map, the key findings that we found were like your core forest and important terrestrial wildlife areas are directly correlated with your wetland and water resources and forested lands within the town of Ossining. And basically, as you can imagine, a lot of your core forests are still located around the Indian Brook Reservoir. And then your key terrestrial wildlife areas are also found very much along the border of the town of Newcastle and the town of Ossining. Next. All right, so we also looked at your parks and protected resources, and this really focused on protected open space. And we specifically looked at water supply lands, cemeteries, public institutions. We also looked at any conservation easements, parks and trails, any of the trails that are established and have some sort of either they're established like parkland trails, or they're ones that are just trail networks within the state. We also looked at your parks, and then critical environmental areas, which are specifically the Indian Brook Reservoir, and then Island Park, Croton Trailway, Briarcliff Peekskill Trailway. There's a number of them that are identified as from the Department of Environmental Conservation. Next slide. So the key findings there is that a lot of your conserved land in Ossining and Newcastle actually contribute to the core forest and a lot of the important terrestrial wildlife. The conservation lands are typically associated with surface water resources as well as drinking water resources. And then that there are potentially further opportunities to protect resources while linking existing open spaces within the town of Ossining. So we also looked at your underutilized lands, and I think this is really the key of an open space plan, is that we looked at the unprotected open space. This is areas that are undeveloped land that is not permanently protected, but this could be both public and private. And then we also looked at a lot of your private institutions, because that's where you typically find large land tracts. And then we also looked at vacant underdeveloped lands that could potentially be developed at some point in time, but they just currently are either underdeveloped, they have very little development taking place that could have more development, or they contain like almost no structures. Next slide. So here, your key findings, the gray parcels are specifically ones that are private, vacant, underdeveloped properties. And then the purple parcels are the private institutions. And what we found were that your underutilized areas do overlap with key resources, especially the private, vacant, or underdeveloped areas definitely overlap around your Indian Brook Reservoir, around some of your like Sing Sing Kill. And then your institutional lands definitely have nice connections to a number of your parks and trailways, which could potentially add to additional connections or additional trailways. Right. So part of this is also looking at, once you put all these things together, what are your strategic parcels in terms of the town of Ossining? And so there are a couple of key categories there. First is water quality. So this is really focuses on parcels that are adjacent to your Indian Brook Reservoir or other areas, your Indian Brook Croton Gorge, Indian Brook Croton Gorge watershed, which is a critical environmental area, and also the whole protection overlay district. The use of conservation easements or clustering typically are where like we would be focusing on some of protecting some of those and prioritizing some of these resources. Recreation connectivity is another one, parcels adjacent to existing parks, open spaces, or trails that specifically should be prioritized. And those typically you would either have conservation easements or trying to cluster or strategically allow for public access or trail expansion, maybe through some incentives. You also looked at strategic parcels for like core forests. And then again, these areas are contributed to the core forest and probably should be preserved. And again, like some of the things focused on that would be like deed restrictions or conservation easements. Forest habitats, these are properties that would contain large acres of forest. And again, these would also be, ways to preserve some of this would be, preventing clearing in those particular areas and limit development through clustering or other types of conservation easements. And then your wetlands and water courses, which basically, as you already have protections there in place, but these are properties containing those types of natural resources. Fine. So in the document itself, we specifically identified parcel properties and then identified the resources of those particular properties. So we have we identified if those particular properties have water quality resources, recreation connectivity, if they're core forest, wetlands or water courses. And so this specifically lays out, so in terms of being able to identify what are important properties, especially if they come before the planning boards or your land use boards in the future. Next slide. So some of the recommendations that we have in the open space plan are looking at your cluster development amendments. This really focuses on you have the ability instead of a traditional subdivision to cluster, and it's similar to what we just saw. The project that came before you was focused on more of a cluster development as opposed to a subdivision. This was at Stony Lodge. But part of the recommendations is actually looking at your cluster development and revising those to really reflect a little bit more on the environmental resources and maybe also additional protections. Also expand the use of the cluster development and potentially incentivize that the cluster development specifically so that you could preserve some of these natural resources and key properties. Also establish higher standards for subdivision and site plan review within the Indian Brook Croton Gorge watershed, because a number of those properties that are identified in the open space plan actually fall under that new overlay that you adopted. And then also consider a conservation overlay district for very specific properties so that if they do go for redevelopment, that they automatically have to have cluster development. We did not necessarily, clearly there are other mechanisms that can be identified through like an open space plan, which could be like conservation, or acquisition of land. But we really wanted to find ideas and concepts and recommendations that you could implement automatically. And it didn't necessarily have to be something where you really create or have to deal with money in terms of like new bonds or any sort of new passing of laws in terms of like additional like an open space fund or something like that. So those are also in the draft document. Those are also options to the town, but we were really focusing on things you can implement right away. So I think in terms of like the next steps, we have the Environmental Advisory Council will be reviewing the draft plan, and then they'll be providing us comments on it. And then we're also looking for a review from your end, and then any comments, and then we'll incorporate all those comments, come back with like a final draft, and then that can go towards like either another public workshop or, you know, public hearing on it. So, and then ultimately, then we can talk about developing some zoning amendments or changes to help implement some of the recommendations.
Thank you. I do have a question. Now
Sure.
that we have this draft and hopefully soon to be a concrete plan as we adopt this, I did notice some funding sources to preserve open space. Would we be a better candidate for that funding now that we have taken the time to identify what would benefit our community
Yeah.
and what parcels are valuable in?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and that will help you in terms of, you know, and even just in terms of potential like trail development, you know, any of those types of grants, when it's identified specifically in a plan, that does help you, absolutely.
And I know that the board is interested in preserving open spaces and protecting our environmental assets. so-
Yes.
And our environments. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? It also encourages connecting the different trailways that we have, correct?
Yes, it does. It's not specifically a trail, like, so it doesn't necessarily dive into where the trails should run. It just identifies key parcels that potentially you could have those kind of connections towards. If you were interested in like developing that, that would have to be like probably not to necessarily another study, but you know, you really have to look at like what's going on that property, you know, and also this is, a number of these are private. They're not town-owned properties. So this would be something that you would work with a particular, you know, property owner to develop that concept or plan. Or when they're before the planning boards, you could develop it at that point.
One question, Valerie, does our neighboring communities have this plan
So,
method yet, like Newcastle or Cortland?
I don't, well, Portland and Croton are just starting a natural resources inventory. So my guess is that eventually they'll move towards that. I do not know if the town of Newcastle has that. I know the village of Ossene is interested in doing a natural resources inventory as well. So, I mean, it is something that a number of neighboring communities are starting to take steps in terms of pieces of that.
Good.
This open space plan sort of combines both your natural resources inventory and open space plan, although a natural resources inventory sometimes does even a deeper dive. But I think in terms of really, I mean, I think the biggest issue with the comprehensive plan and the concern was that you have some of these larger properties. And what if they were to be developed? You know, what does that look like if it was just a standard subdivision? And how do we try to protect those in the natural resources and open space character of them?
Thanks.
Perfect. Do you think that, you know, the floodplain frequencies of 100 years and 500 years are going to be updated since they happen kind of yearly now?
I do not know that for sure. But basically, but in all reality, I think, well, with any development that comes before a planning board, they end up having to do their own analysis. This just kind of gives you a little snapshot of like your key areas in terms of like where are the areas where there are already floodplains and flood zones, so that you wouldn't necessarily maybe want to have like large scale development actually in the floodplain itself. And so maybe that's where you can make sure you carve out or specifically identifying like your zoning that you've already adopted floodplain regulations, but specifically to try to encourage people not to necessarily get those permits, but to develop outside of those areas.
Perfect. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
doing the work on this. I know it was a deep dive and a lot of effort.
Yeah, and we just wanted to thank again the Hudson River Valley Greenway. They have been funding this plan has been basically kind of funded by them. So we just wanted to give them a thanks for helping us with this too as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, That's the end of our work session.
I'm so sorry. I think Dave said Dave, do you still wish to speak or say something on behalf of the AC?
Sure. So we're going to have some comments about our work session from our Environmental Advisory Council, who met last night. Last night?
Yes, last night, it was Adriana was kind enough to do the presentation and very much appreciate that. I was asked by Mitzi to present tonight some couple of comments that we had. It's a pretty short presentation. I apologize for not being quite as prepared as I might be because there was a Con Ed rate case today that I presented at, so
Thank
that
you
was
for
my
that.
1 o'clock. And so I've kind of pulled some things together. Most of you know me. I'm Dave Margulis with the EAC and also the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference. First, I want to say I appreciate the work that Valerie and Pope Voorhees has done putting this together because I think it's a very necessary and desirable plan for the town to have in order to make determinations of future conservation efforts. We had just really two significant comments. I have some others about details, but I don't think that's necessarily appropriate here and now. That about things in the draft plan. All right. The first was that a failure to include all the Pocantico River tributaries on the various maps. I don't think this is really Pope Voorhees so much as ESRI, who has not done, there are a couple of errors on the ESRI base maps. One of them is like the position of Sally Swope Park, which is about 3/4 of a mile south of its actual position and is in a, what is it? It's in Parth Knowles, actually, today on their maps. I'm in the process of trying to get that corrected, but I made an effort tonight. I'm not sure if it works, so I'm going to try again. So that's one thing, but also these tributaries, specifically in the floodplain areas and over by North State Road, where Missy used to live. So she's familiar with it. The maps themselves do not show all of the little pieces of tributary that are around there. The concern that we have with that is that as this plan goes to something formal and is adopted, that if the maps are taken as verbatim rather than as kind of suggestions about what the physical environment looks like, then decisions could be made based on the information being displayed, a rational thing to do, but they would be incorrect because that information is not in fact accurate. So correcting that is not trivial. It is not anything the EAC is in a position to do. You need all kinds of drones and surveyors and things like that to make those corrections. But some kind of statement within the plan itself would be, I would think would be, or we think would be desirable as both for the town's protection and for the environment's protection.
So something along the lines of all hydrologic properties have not been identified?
Correct, and need to be verified on the ground before decisions are made relative to them. I don't know exactly how you say that, but essentially that's what I would to say. Some kind of disclaimer there. The other thing that we would come forward with is something that Valerie mentioned or Pope Voorhees mentioned, which was the Community Preservation Fund. The committee's feeling is that the recommendations presented allow for mitigation of the degradation of the environment, but they don't allow for stopping the degradation of the environment, because what you're saying is you're going to allow the development on the land. So the land inherently is no longer going to be available in the state that it is currently in. All right. And sometimes that's absolutely appropriate. And certainly we don't want to stop all development in the town, because that's not in anybody's interest. But there probably, particularly for the parcels that are listed in their table, there are solutions that would require funding. And a community preservation fund would be one legal mechanism that would allow for those funds to be raised, for the town to be able to spend money on things that it deemed at the time to be worth spending the money on, whether that's the purchase of development rights, whether that's outright acquisition, whether that's some consideration for a conservation easement. Any and all of the above would require some kind of funding, and either that comes out of direct, town budgetary funds, which is hard to do if you haven't budgeted it and you're in the middle of the year, or else gives you a reserve that would allow you to have some resources to do these things as was deemed desirable. All right. The other thing a community preservation fund does is that it is allowable to, it is enabled to receive donations of property and land. And therefore could be a better vehicle for having those kinds of things occur.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
Just curious, are you familiar with any municipalities that have that sort of fund that we could?
There are, to my knowledge, and very trivial research, 7 municipalities in the Hudson Valley that have done this. None of them are in Westchester, unfortunately. But the towns of Chatham, Gardner, Marbletown, and New Paltz have done that, and the city of Kingston. In fact, there are 2 more, and I'm sorry that I didn't list them because I listed those because they got approval for. So let me back up just a little bit and then I'll go forward to this. The flip side of having a community preservation fund is the fact that typically it is funded by a tax levy on the transfer of property. Now, that poses obvious problems to any political entity, in that you got to put it to a vote of the taxpayers. All right. Those 5 towns, although in a different time, shall we say, got approval rates of 70% when they put it to a vote. And the city of Kingston, when it did the similar thing in 23, I believe that was, got a 62% vote of support. So it seems like those areas that are willing to go ahead with it know in advance that they're going to do well, I think, election, right? People, they don't go into it blind, and I would certainly not recommend that that be done here either. But I think, and the EAC thinks, that the advantage to the town of having actually a resource base to do the kind of conservation things that may not be available or effective to do through a clustering or, or zoning, a cluster zoning or that kind of effort. It would be tremendously advantageous to have those resources to give the town those options in advance. And while this is not something that one would do tomorrow afternoon, you can pass zoning ordinances relatively quickly in the next couple of months if you wanted to. I suspect this would take longer. Be probably worthwhile to have the resources, assuming it demonstrated itself to be feasible. There are definitely things to do up front that would let you know how much it would be worth going forward. polls and things like that, and getting out into the community and mentioning these things and seeing how much, what the feeling of the community is toward actually presenting this in a poll, long before you would ever go forward with actually doing that. I would recommend that it is worthwhile to make that effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and the entire EAC for taking the time to read through the document. I was reading some of the comments that were presented, and they were thoughtful and thorough and considerate. So always appreciate the board. If there are anybody out there that wants to join the EAC, that cares about our local environment, waterways, byways, there is room on the board. So a plug for that. Okay. So, and something else you mentioned, the Con Ed rate case hearings. Very important. If you are unhappy with the concept of the rate increase from Con Ed, I would like to make it known to the Public Service Commission. Once again, you have an opportunity tomorrow at 1 p.m. and tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the Westchester County Center in White Plains. You don't have to register. You can just go and you can be heard. I know I've gone before. I know Ken Jenkins went today. Speak to the Public Service Commission today, as David did. Kate Harcum and Dana did as well. I've taken a previous opportunity, as have, I'm sure, my colleagues and some of our members. But the more voices that are heard, and the more voices that speak about what the impacts of a rate change, self your business, and will take care of the municipality, will help them understand where they're coming from. And you know, almost all of the Westchester municipalities have been together, hired a lawyer, and we are an intervening party also. So anyway, that said, hope to see you at our concert on Friday. It will be the 3 Bs, and they are very energetic band. And have a good evening. We will see you in 2 weeks on the 22nd. Right back here at the channel. Thank you for joining us.
Is there anything for executive session?
Oh, yeah, sorry. And we'll adjourn to executive session for contracts, advice of counsel, and do you have anything? Contracts and advice of.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.